Hello, today we are going to look at solving one-step equations. That means they're going to have a variable or letter in them. Okay, a variable is just a letter or an unknown. They can use any letter in the alphabet. The most common ones used are X, Y, and Z, but they can use any of them, A through Z. And they usually use lowercase letters. The uppercase letters are saved for graphing. So you can see any letter A through Z. An equation has an equal sign. And the whole point of an equation is to isolate the variable or to get the letter alone on one side and the number and signs on the other side, just like that. Okay, so that's what an answer would look like. That's a variable. And it is isolated. There is one of them. Now, we can put a 1 in front of it, but they don't do that. They save that for when you need to add letters or do other math, and we'll talk about that later. All right, let's go look at some and follow the steps. The first thing you need to do is write them down, even if you think you can do them in your head. I always make sure that the part of the equation with the letter is on the left. My first step, write it down. Then I find my letter. There it is, A. So I'm looking for what A could be. Now my second step is to look at the math that's on the same side as the letter or variable. I have -2. So that means they subtracted 2 from this number. It's like a puzzle. We're going to undo the math by doing the opposite to both sides of the equation. When we're adding or subtracting, we want to get rid of this number or get it to 0. So we use the opposite to both sides. When we're multiplying and dividing, we want to get it to one letter. All right, so the opposite of subtract 2 is add 2. And sometimes you see people do this. Add 2 to both sides of the equation. And when I do that, that cancels out, giving me 0. I bring down my A equals 5 plus 2 is 7. So my answer is 7. All right, let's move on to another one. The ones at the top are fairly easy. Our next one is C plus 10 equals 13. There's my letter or variable, C. On the same side, the math I have is adding 10. The opposite of adding 10 is subtracting 10. And I'm going to do this up here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and subtract that instead of changing it because the first number is bigger than the second. But you should get used to doing your cross the line, change the sign, and follow your add rules. That gives me 0, so it cancels out. I've got C equals 3. Okay, so these are fairly easy. There isn't any signs here that you need to use. Here, I'd add 9 to both sides. All right, let's get down to these. This is A divided by 4 equals 2. All right, here's the side with the letter. I need to get A by itself. The opposite of dividing by 4 is multiplying by 4. So I'm going to do the opposite of the math that they did, undo it to both sides. So I'm going to multiply by 4, multiply by 4. Okay? And that cancels out. 4 divided by 4 gives me 1A, or A, because there's one of them, equals 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, so that's how you work those. This is why you need to write them down. Right? Next one. Anytime you see a number in front of a letter or variable, it indicates multiplication, or 2 letters next to each other. This is read as 4 times C equals 12. Right, that's called a coefficient. Coefficient. All right, I found my side with the letter. It's on the left. The opposite of multiply is divide. We show that with the fraction line. So I'm going to divide both sides by the number that's with the letter. You always use the number with the letter. Okay, when I divide this out, it gives me 1C, or C equals 12 divided by 4 is 3. Okay? All right, another division. V divided by 2 equals 5. Found my letter. It has division by 2. The opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2 to both sides of the equation. When I do that, 2 divided by 2 cancels out and gives me 1v. 5 times 2 is 10. All right, and that's how we do these. Next one, I have add 7. The opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7 to both sides. Here, I have subtracting 1. The opposite of subtracting 1 is adding 1 to both sides. Here, multiplication. This means 6 times r equals 36. 6 times r equals 36. The opposite of multiplying is dividing by 6 to both sides. That cancels out, giving me 1r. 36 divided by 6 is 6. Okay? Here, I do the opposite of subtract 5, which is add 5 to both sides. Here, I do the opposite of subtract 6, which is add 6 to both sides. Here, I do the opposite of add 3, which is subtract 3 to both sides. And yes, your answer can be a 0. All right, now we get to our signs. All right, s plus 1 equals negative 4. Got to use those sign rules. Found my letter. The opposite of subtracting 1 or adding 1 is subtracting 1. This cancels out, leaving me with my s isolated, and I don't subtract. I'm going to cross the line, opposite sign behind, and follow the add rules. Negative 4 plus negative 1. Same sign, keep the sign, add the numbers, and there is my answer. Okay? This is why we need to write them down. The next one, I've got k divided by negative 1 equals 2. Found my letter. I've got divided by 1 on that side. The opposite of dividing by 1 is multiplying by negative 1. Sorry, forgot to say them. Negative there. I was trying to change color pen there. All right. Multiplying by 1 to both sides of the equation to negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1. 2 negatives gives me a positive. 2 times negative 1, 1 negative, gives me a negative answer. And that's how we solve that. All right? Make sure you have it written down or pause. All right, this next one is very common, and you see a lot of these. So I want to make sure we get an opportunity to look at one. Negative d equals 6. Okay, can't have a negative letter. But we know that that's 1d. So that means there's a negative 1d equals 6. That means multiplication. The opposite of multiplying is dividing both sides by negative 1. When we do that, negative divided by negative gives me a positive 1, or d is positive now. 6 divided by negative 1, 1 negative gives me a negative 6. You must do that. You cannot have a negative variable. Okay? All right. Let's move on. Make sure you've written that down. It's an absolutely fantastic example of things you're going to see. The next one, negative 6 times b equals negative 18. Okay, we found our side with the letter. It's b. We have multiplied by negative 6. The opposite of multiplying by negative 6 is dividing both sides by negative 6. All right, that cancels out. Negative 6 divided by negative 6, you've got 2 negatives, so you get a positive 1b. 2 negatives here, so I get a positive 3. 18 divided by 6. All right, next one. The letter F divided by negative 5 equals negative 2. Oh, and by the way, I probably should have said this at the beginning. You can put the letter in like this when you do your answers, but if you do that, you either put in no spaces or a space between the equal in front and behind. But the best way to do it is just put the number in, okay? All right, so we found our letter. It's F. On the same side, what math did they show us? Divided by negative 5. The opposite of dividing by negative 5 is multiplying by negative 5. And the sign goes with us because we don't want a negative letter. Okay, negative 5 divided by negative 5, 2 negatives give us positive 1f or f. 2 negatives here, it's going to give me a positive, and 2 times 5 is 10. So you can just put in 10, okay? You don't have to put the letter. All right, make sure you have that written down. All right, this one I'm going to definitely work because every time you guys see fractions, you freak. So this is 1/2 times y equals negative 4. Okay, I found my letter, it's y. On the same side, I have multiplied by half. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, but we don't divide fractions. We flip them and multiply. So I am going to flip this fraction, means the reciprocal. We multiply by the reciprocal to both sides. 2 over 1 times 2 over 1. I'll put a 1 under that. Okay. When I multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom, that's going to give me 2 divided by 2, or 2 over 2, which is 1y. Cancels it out. Okay. On this side, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 over 1. We got 1 negative there, so our answer is negative 8. And the last one on here, k plus 12 equals negative 10. This one, I see lots of people make mistakes, so I'm going to work it. You know what? First, I'm going to clear the screen real quick. Go back to red, rewrite it on this side. All right. K plus 12 equals negative 10. We need the room. All righty. Found my letter. It's K. On the same side, the person added 12. I'm going to undo that by the opposite math. The opposite of adding 12 is subtracting 12 to both sides. Notice how I write that side to side. That way we can do our integer math. This is going to cancel out, giving me 0, which is none. So my K is isolated. On this side, we don't subtract. So I need to do my math. When I see a subtract sign, I got 2 things to do. I got to cross the line to make it a plus. An opposite sign behind it was a positive, so it becomes a negative. And now I follow the add rules. Same sign. Keep the sign, add the numbers. And there we go. So the answer I'd put in is a negative 22. All right, so that is this one. Let's quickly go look at a few on the other page so that I know that you are comfortable with them. Oh, it's not that one. There it is. Solving one-step equations part 2. Same thing, do these on scratch paper. You only have to enter the answer, not the letter. Okay, I'm not going to do the first few. You see it's 8x plus 8 equals 10. We'd subtract 8 to both sides. Here, this is 4 times w equals 24. The opposite of multiply is divide 4 to both sides. Here, y minus 3 equals 9. The opposite of minus 3 is add 3 to both sides. All right, this is t divided by 3 equals 12. The opposite of divide is to multiply both sides by 3. All right, this one I am going to work because they wrote it backwards. 24 equals p plus 5. Well, I'm not working it backwards. P plus 5 equals 24. They write it backwards to confuse you. Write it on your scratch paper with the letter part side on the left. The opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5 to both sides. That gives me 0, and p equals 19. Okay? And then you just have to type in your answer. Nothing else. This one has a negative. That's negative 8 times h equals 32. So you would divide both sides by negative 8. Negative 8h times h equals 32. That's multiplication. The opposite of multiply is divide both sides by negative 8. Now my pen's starting to act up. Hang on just a second. All right. Well, we're going to divide both sides by negative 8. That cancels out. My h is there. We've got one negative, and so we get a -4. All right. This is x divided by 5 equals 15. The opposite of divide by 5 is multiply by sides by 5. This one's written backwards. To solve it, turn it around to n minus 13 equals 18. The opposite of subtracting 13 is adding 13 to both sides. Turn it around. 5 times p equals -35. The opposite of multiply is divide both sides by 5. M plus 9 equals 7. Be careful on that one, please. The opposite of adding 9 is subtracting 9 to both sides. Cross the line, opposite sign. See? You get a -2. Different signs, I subtract. I have more negatives than positives. Be careful. The next one, r minus 12 equals -3. The opposite of subtracting 12 is adding 12 to both sides. You've got your r, different signs, so we subtract. 12 minus 3 gives us 9. 3 negatives, 12 positives, so my answer is a +9. So I would type in 9 for number 11. This one, they wrote it backwards. Turn it around, please. To w divided by 2 equals 16. The opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying both sides by 2. That cancels out. My w's isolated, one of them. 16 times 2 is your answer. I'm not going to finish that for you. You can do it. All right, this one I do want to work. 8 plus x equals 23. If the number's in front, if the number's first, we don't look at this. We look at the sign of the number, okay? That's important because they're going to trick you here. So if the number's first, we look at its sign and we do the opposite. This is a +8. The opposite of a +8 is a -8. That cancels out, giving me 0. That's a +x equals 23 minus 8. And you finish it, okay? Get your 15 and move on. All right. Here, doesn't matter where you put the negative, but you're going to want to use the 3, I think, right? So we've got n divided by -3 equals 6. The opposite of dividing by -3 is multiplying both sides by -3. It cancels out, giving me 1 n, 1 negative. So my answer to type in is -18. Pause if you need to. Be careful on this. You're going to add 1 to both sides and follow your sign rules. This is written backwards. -3 times y equals -12. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by -3. Sorry, -3. Cancels out, giving me 1y. 2 negatives. I get a positive. I type in 4. Okay? This is division, divided by 4. The opposite of dividing is multiplying both sides by 4. This is add 15. The opposite is subtract 15. This is multiply both sides. This is multiply by 6. The opposite of multiplying by 6 is divide both sides by 6. The opposite of subtracting 11 is to add 11 to both sides. And then you'll have -4 plus 11. Different signs, stop, subtract, keep the sign of the most. So that's how you work these. I hope this helped. Write them down, work them out, do your best. And if you have any questions, let me know. Happy to help you.